Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Forge of Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Alex Ooley, and this is episode 156 of the Forge of Freedom. Today, I've got a quick episode for you. I just want to send out a reminder about an upcoming event that we're hosting in Salem, Indiana. Salem, Indiana is in southern Indiana. For those of you who are not familiar with southern Indiana, it's just a little bit north of Louisville, Kentucky. And the event is it's a seminar. It's called A Church-Focused Study of the Active Shooter Problem and How to Minimize Victims. And we're hosting Ed Monk for that presentation. And Ed Monk, he's an instructor with Last Resort Firearms Training out in Whitehall, Arkansas. But he's an expert in the active shooter problem. And he gives a number of presentations on the active shooter problem from slightly different perspectives. And this particular one is, as the title suggests, the church-focused perspective of the problem. And also, uh, as you might imagine, it's not that big of a deal just to identify the problem, but Ed Monk really emphasizes not only what the problem is, but also what some of the most effective strategies in response to the problem are. And so if you're in the area on December 3rd, it's Tuesday, December 3rd from 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at the Salem Assembly of God in Salem, Indiana. And that's at 1701 State Highway 135 in Salem. And it's $30. Part of the reason I want to bring this to your attention now is that there's an early bird special. It's $30 through November 1st, and the price goes up to $40 on November 2nd. So sign up while you can still get the early bird pricing. But I think that even if you don't attend church, I think this is especially valuable if you're a church goer, if you're a member of a board of a church or the leader of a church or the pastor of a church. This is absolutely, I think, essential information for you to know and to digest and to understand. But even if you're just somebody who goes to church or doesn't even go to church, I think a lot of the principles, the ideas, the strategies that Ed Monk identifies and addresses are applicable across various domains and various organizational settings. And so I think that you'll get something from this seminar nevertheless. If you're a school member of some sort, if you're a teacher, if you're an administrator, if you're staff of some sort at a school, I think that these ideas are applicable in that setting as well. Now, Ed does have a school-focused presentation, and he has given that in Indiana in the past. I believe he spoke at the National Association of School Resource Officer conference last year in Indianapolis. I believe he'll be back in Indianapolis next year in 2025 to give his school-focused talk. But I think that, like I said, a lot of the principles are applicable across domains. There are some nuances to the various settings. Obviously, a church is not just like a school, but there are similarities, and I think people who are engaged in schools on a regular basis will certainly get something out of this church-focused study. Once again, this is Tuesday, December 3rd in Salem, Indiana. It's $30 through November 1st and $40 starting November 2nd. So get the tickets at $30 while you can. Ed Monk and I also want to point out, Ed Monk and I were on the Gun Guy radio show over the weekend. That's a radio show in Indianapolis on WIBC. I will link to that show in the show notes if you want to go check that out to get a sample of the sorts of things you might, or that you will hear rather, at the seminar on December 3rd. I also had Ed Monk on the Forge of Freedom podcast in episode 134 back in June. I met Ed in Dallas, Texas this spring, earlier this year, at the NRA annual meeting. I attended that with my father, and Ed spoke at the NRA annual meeting. It's a big deal to get invited to speak at the educational seminars that they have at the NRA annual meeting. I think that's a substantial endorsement of your expertise in a particular field. And Ed spoke on 3 different days. So he had, and it was well attended. All of his seminars were well attended, and I think rightfully so. It was the first time I'd heard him speak in person, and it was just extremely fascinating stuff, and extremely useful. And I think that most people, I've been a firearms instructor for over a decade, and even I found something that was quite valuable from his seminars. So I think that those who are not so engaged in the firearms industry and the firearms training world will almost certainly find something useful from his seminar as well. In fact, I have a friend who is former law school classmates with a Supreme Court justice in a state. I won't say which, but that Supreme Court justice called my friend and said, "I saw this seminar was going to be in your area, and you should really attend. I heard him speak, and it was life-changing." And apparently this is a person who doesn't ordinarily speak in hyperbole or in with exaggerated terms, and thought that Ed Monk's presentation was life-changing. So there's a bit of an endorsement if you want something that's beyond the endorsement that I provided. And Guy, over the weekend, Guy Relford, who's a well-known attorney, a well-known firearms instructor, he's known as the gun guy, someone I respect greatly. He indicated that Ed is the foremost expert on the active shooter problem and the active shooter response. He doesn't know anybody with more expertise in this particular area than Ed Monk. So I think I've gotten my point across here. I think this is the information that Ed Monk provides is really important information, and I think is something that is well worth your time to consider. We also have a Facebook event page. If you like to use Facebook, there's some information there. You can find it at our Facebook page, Forge of Freedom, and the link to the Eventbrite page to sign up is there as well. In fact, before I close up here, I'm going to keep this, like I said, relatively brief. I'll put this up on the screen for those of you watching the podcast by video. I'll put up, first of all, this is the podcast that I recorded with Ed Monk, episode 134. If you go to forgeoffreedom.com and search for Ed Monk or episode 134, you'll find the episode there with all of the show notes. It's approximately an hour-long episode. Give you a really good taste of what sort of information you'll hear at the seminar, but really just kind of touches the surface. And then also, I'll put up here on the screen the podcast or a segment where we joined Guy Relford on The Gun Guy over the weekend, and I'll link to all of this, of course. And then 2 more tabs here. Here's the church-focused study of the active shooter problem on the Forge of Freedom website. If you go there, you can see the cost with the description and the link to the Eventbrite page. There's also a link there to download the flyer for the event. If you want to download the flyer and share it with others, we would certainly appreciate that. And then lastly, I want to share the Eventbrite page. This is where you actually have to sign up. You can go there and select your ticket, how many you want to purchase, and check out there at the Eventbrite page. As I said, it's $30 through November 1st, $40 starting November 2nd. All right, everybody, that's where I'm going to leave it for this week's episode. I just wanted to share this information now while there is still a little bit of time to get the early bird price. I really hope that I'll see you in December. Again, it's December 3rd, 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. And Of course, until next time, you can always find our show on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, and X. I'm on X at Forge of Freedom, and you can find all of the previous episodes at forgeoffreedom.com. Until next time, remember, you are the Forge of Freedom.